What's up, summoners? King Blair here. Usually, when a new unit comes out or a buff comes out, it sometimes takes some time for the unit's true potential to come out, and a lot of the times people can get these units wrong, and sometimes the unit is stronger than I initially thought or initially weaker. So today for Top 5 Tuesday, we're going to be talking about the top 5 units that I was wrong about, especially some of the more recent ones that I am just still shocked for some of them how strong they became, and for some how kind of underperforming they are right now. But if you like the video, make sure you like, subscribe, and Discord server, link down in the description. But without further ado, let's jump right into this top 5 and comment down below which units were you wrong about, right? Because sometimes the first few weeks, we don't really know how the unit strong is going to be. And then in a month, hindsight 2020, you're like, man, this unit is broken, or man, this unit kind of trash. So with that, let's start with some honorable mentions. And we have none other than, for me, Lionheart Sermia was actually an honorable mention. The big reason is, like, I always knew she would be a good counter unit, and I knew she was good at countering counterattack units. But at the time she was released, it was only really Violet and Rem. And now we have Belian, Emeru's used a lot. See Lilia's dual attacks. There's a lot of heroes that actually dual attack and rely on counterattacks. And people have figured out like the perfect build with lifesteal, that she's really became much stronger and just a overall incredible pick. One of my most wanted MO 5 stars at this point is honestly going to be Lionheart Sermium. And the other one is going to be none other than a Ravi. And I know a lot of people actually did get this unit wrong, right? Before, her fire counterpart, the regular Robbie, used to be busted. So they kind of got a Robbie up to speed, and she's the monster that she's today. They gave her the 15% CR push to kind of match what Robbie did, where she get the 15% CR push after getting hit, as well as giving her a very nice damage scaling on this S3, as well as giving her injury on this S1, right? Which at the time didn't seem like a big deal. You're just like, okay, Robbie kind of cranks up, but Ravi's S3 is crazier. Well, it was highly underestimated how much damage this S3 could do, as well as how much damage she just does overall. And with Pensa coming out along with her, she's just doing unethical amounts of damage, especially since she's always was a fan favorite. So people really went hard on her build. Definitely a unit that, at the time I was like, oh, this should bring her back a little bit. I did not expect it to be the monster that she's today, and I imagine a lot of players were in that same boat. But that is going to take us to the actual top 5. And at number 5, we have a unit that I actually thought was going to be better, but sees like zero play. And that is going to be none other than Domino. If I can actually find her. Right here, Domino. So essentially, she got the passive where she gets to do the reflect whenever an ally suffers a critical hit, right? When this buff was released, Cleve, was starting to come back. Ran and Peyra were very popular. I mean, Ran is still extremely popular, but there was a lot of Cleaves and there was a lot of damage flying around, and I was like, maybe with this passive now you could actually use her for Cleave, right? Where you can get the reflect on command and a barrier, and then you'd be able to protect your allies, right? And I thought that would be a great buff, and I was like, I could see her being a pretty spicy anti-Cleave. Well, because it's so RNG, it kind of ended up not really doing much, as well as Cleave just getting even more options in the future. So it's one of those buffs that happened that I was very, very surprised about, that I was like, oh man, it's just often not, it was just not enough to actually put it on the map. At number 4, we have none other than Mort. This is probably one of the worst for me, the unit I was the most wrong about from release, because on release, before he actually came out, when we saw the kit, it was like, this guy does a lot, right? Very high decrease defense, healing on S3, injuries on S3, right? He does all this stuff. S2, was always kind of like the weak one, but Sage Ball at the time was really strong. It was the same time that A Tywin and Sage Ball were busted, which Sage Ball is still incredibly good for anti-cleaving and honestly just a good control unit. But he used to be really, really good because it's anti-sleep, anti-stun mechanic. And I was like, man, he's a Golden Boys counter. They're pretty popular right now. You can beat Emil Craw with this. I really thought that this guy was going to like change the meta. And he came out and he essentially became a meme because of how bad he was, right? So it's one of those things that a lot of the times it's not about how much you have on your skills, how many passives, because he has so much going on his skills. It's actually like thinking of how that's actually going to perform and waiting for damage calculations, because this S3, the damage ratios when he was released were very, very, very low. So it's one of those things that's like, man, before release, I really did think this guy was actually going to be mid at the time. Huge mistake, huge oversight. This guy definitely sucked. Even now with the new EE and buffs that he's received, he's still pretty pretty mid, right? I mean, he can be used, but he's honestly not the monster that he's in the story or that I thought he was going to be when he was first released. So definitely something that I definitely dropped the ball on. The other one is going to be none other than actually Elphelt, and this was another one that was buffed. There's a lot of these are the buff ones. Release heroes, typically you can get a good idea when they're released how they're going to perform, but for some of the like buff heroes, it's really hard to tell. But with Elphelt, that's one of the ones that even to this day I still don't know why she's not used more, outside of the fact that she's not guaranteed, right? And that her base speed is not one of the highest in the game. I know with Ran and Peyra it became harder for the mid-range speed threats, but I've been having a lot of success recently with Cowrick. I've been starting some RTA again, so I think the mid-range definitely has some space, but I wonder if legit the only reason she doesn't see more play is because it's just you might get 15% in. If you get 50% in, she doesn't do as much, right? She's still an AoE attack buffer. She's still a hero that can decrease defense a single target. In theory, can one-shot a single target enemy, right? Set up attack buff for the team, and just overall do a lot, right? So it's one of those heroes that I am still surprised is not seeing the meta. Outside, as I mentioned, of the speed and the 15%, which honestly, that might be enough. And it might be one of the reasons we also don't see Falconeer Clary as much as we used to do, just because it's, man, losing a game because you got resisted, one of the worst feelings in the game, right? But now that is going to take us to the number 2, which are 2 very recent units that I'm still in shock about. Every time I look at them, I'm like, how are you this strong now, right? And I think you guys may actually be able to know who these 2 units are, but they actually have been made a massive appearance recently in the Epic 7 World Cup and have just been kind of everywhere. Number 2, we actually have none other than Chu. So for Chu, I kind of knew that she'd be a good Guild Wars unit after they gave her the counterattack buff. But again, it wasn't anything too crazy, right? But then they actually gave her the actual buff, where she basically got an Elris passive. And I was like, okay, Charles kind of does the same thing. You know, there's all these heroes that kind of can do counterattacks, and they haven't made as big of an impact. But man, Shu, I recently had the joy of going against a few, and a well-built Shu in some good teams, and even in Guild Wars, it's so hard to take care of once she gets sets up. So essentially, if you didn't know what Shu does, S1, pretty basic. She gets focus, and she also heals, which again, one of the parts of the buff, she actually gets innate healing, right? She doesn't have to build lifesteal. She can just build counter. The EE, the exclusive equipment, gives her speed, and it also makes it so if you crit on your S1, you have a chance to activate your S2, and your S2 penetrates defense by 70%. That is a huge defense pen that can just be activated off of a counterattack, right? And then of course, the S3, when the skill is on cooldown, you get an L Restore passive, which essentially, if your allies are hit, you have a chance to counterattack, which means you have a chance to go into Fush, right? So one of those things that it's shocking how much damage this unit can actually do. And with Hua being as prevalent as she is, and just her being such a good bruiser, she overperformed into what I initially thought. I always thought, you know, she's getting there, right? Slowly but surely, she's actually getting up to be like a meta hero. But she jumped from being like, okay, viable, to instantly being meta, right? Like she skipped like a whole tier. Which I thought was the one that she was gonna be good, but now she's like just straight up amazing, right? So one of those things that definitely an oversight. But again, it's always interesting to see. I thought she was gonna be another Charles, or like kind of like Ilnov, because Ilnov was one of the heroes that people thought was gonna be like Charles, but she just didn't have that oomph that she has. But that is going to take us to the number 1 hero, and I honestly, if you still ask me, I wouldn't believe you if you told me this unit was meta. I still don't. I'm still in shock. But I even use mine. And every time I use mine, I'm like, man, this unit can actually do a lot. But that is going to be none other than Alencia. This unit, to this day, it's been like a month almost, or like a couple weeks. This unit still shocks me on how much she rose. She was unplayable, right? She was basically an unplayable hero, kind of like a meme fun pick. And she went from that to a meta top tier contender, right? It's just, I'm honestly in awe, right? A big reason was the recent injury buff. If you guys didn't know, the injury set got buffed, and it makes it so for single target damage, you can do up to 12%, I believe, off of single target attacks. Oh, so we're already in the journal. Let me see if I can get one of my injuries to show you guys if you didn't already know this. So for single ones, when a single attack is 12%. So what Alencia has going for her now is they gave her the passive so she always can do her 2-tap as long as she doesn't have unbuffable on her. She gets this passive just by starting her turn. And she just gets to do the S1, boom, boom, boom. going to an S2, which is 24% injury. It comes out to be effectively like 18% because the first 12% lowers the total of the units by 88%, and then you do it again. So I think 20% is like the functional. I'd have to do the calculations on that. But again, 20% injury instantly, right? At 20%, 20k HP unit instantly becomes like a 16k HP unit or something crazy, right? From an S1 into S2. And that has pushed her to be meta because a Ravi is so prevalent in the meta, as well as Shu now, right? So she's one of the best Shu and a Ravi counters because both these heroes rely on their health to do damage. And she comes in, does one S1 combo, boom, instantly that unit is not doing nearly as much damage as they were. By the time you take your second turn, it just increasingly is just like you're literally doing no damage. And Alencia does pretty nice damage, right? Especially with the decreased defense, where she can actually meet that threshold. And on top of all that, she does get that extra effectiveness passive that it is so nice, right? So it is super nice. And she also has entry just on her actual passive. I didn't even know that. And then, of course, the S3, still there, still an amazing strip, which has made her really good into things like DN, because Alencia tends to float around 180, 200. So now if DN decides to do an S3, she can just take her turn, come in, S3, remove all buffs, and now the DN basically has to wait a couple turns before she's actually able to do anything, right? So it's a very good combination of what she can do with the injury and how well she counters meta heroes, right? So it's one of those heroes, even to this day, I'm like, now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, okay, that makes sense. But the first time reading the buffs, I was like, okay, she got a little bit extra damage, like more consistency with S1, S2. I didn't see it, you know? It's one of those things that's like, I'm still in shock that she's as strong as she is. Granted, yes, there's the injury changes that I couldn't use to predict, but it's just interesting to see how things actually play out after a while, because again, there's no way to tell what's occurring in the meta, right? It's one of those things that you're always like, man, you know what's gonna come next, what units are gonna come next, what combos are gonna come next, what units are gonna come around. So it's definitely one of those things that is very cool to see how units change. And of course, everyone's gonna be wrong about a unit. So I'm interested to hear in the comments what y'all think. But that's all I got for you guys, and I will see you next time. Peace.